Did you know that Shakespeare was both born and died in April to the best of our reckoning? Hi there, this is Emma from the Lebanon Public Library, and I'm coming to you with another edition of Grown Up Storytime. So this month's Grown Up Storytime theme is the bard himself, Shakespeare. We have a lot of material on this subject in our library because it has been such a popular research topic for people who are interested in the literary world. It's a fun thing to get excited about, and there's so many different interpretations of Shakespeare's works. So this month I'm going to read you a selection from a very popular Shakespeare book. I'm going to show you some of the materials we have in our collection and hopefully get you a little bit excited about Shakespeare month. So first, our book this month, Bill Bryson, Shakespeare, The World as a Stage. You may be familiar with Bryson as a comedy writer or a travel writer, but he's done some really interesting research as well. The premise of this book is to look at all of the things that we really know about the life of Shakespeare, which is not very much. So I'm going to dive right in and read my selection to you. Let's take a look here. More than 200 years ago, in a sentiment much repeated ever since, the historian George Stevens observed that all we know about Shakespeare is contained within a few scanty facts. That he was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, produced a family there, went to London, became an actor and writer, returned to Stratford, made a will, and died. That wasn't quite true then, and is even less so now, but it's not all that far from the truth either. After 400 years of dedicated hunting, researchers have found about 100 documents related to William Shakespeare and his immediate family. Baptismal records, title deeds, tax certificate, marriage bonds, writs of attachment, court records, and so on. That's a good number as far as these things go, but deeds and bonds and other records are inevitably bloodless. They tell us a great deal about the business of a person's life, but they tell us almost nothing about the emotions behind it. In consequence, there remains an enormous amount that we don't know about William Shakespeare, much of it of a fundamental nature. We don't know, for one thing, exactly how many plays he wrote, or in what order he wrote them. We can deduce something of what he read, but we don't know where he got the books, or what he did with them when he'd finished them. Although he left nearly 1 million words of text, we have just 14 in his own hand, his name signed 6 times, and the words, "by me," on his will. Not a single note or letter or page or manuscript survives. Shakespeare seems to have been the mildest of fellows, and yet the earliest written accounts we have of him are an attack on his character by a fellow artist. He appears to many biographers to have spurned his wife. Famously, he left her only his second best bed in his will, and even that as an apparent afterthought. Yet no one wrote more highly, more devotedly, more beamingly of love and the twinning of kindred souls. We're not sure how best to spell his name, and neither it appears was he, for the name is never spelled in the same way twice in the signatures that survive. Nor can we be entirely confident how he pronounced his name. Harold Cornig, author of the definitive Shakespeare's pronunciation, thought it was possible that Shakespeare said it with a short A, as in shack. It may have been spoken one way in Stratford and another in London, and it may have been variable with his pronunciation as with the spelling. For the rest, he's the literary equivalent of an electron, forever there and not there. What we do have for Shakespeare are his plays, all of them but 1 or 2, thanks in large part to the efforts of his colleagues Henry Condell and John Hemmings, who put together a more or less complete volume of his work in the first folio. It can't be overemphasized just how fortunate we are to have so many of Shakespeare's works, for the usual condition of 16th and early 17th century plays is to be lost. Few manuscripts from any playwright survive, and even printed plays are far more often missing than not. Of the approximately 3,000 plays thought to have been performed on stage in London from the time of Shakespeare's birth to the closure of the theaters by the Puritan coup, 80% are known only by title. Faced with a wealth of text but a poverty of context, scholars have focused obsessively on what they can know. They have counted every word he wrote, logged every dib and jot. The Library of Congress in Washington, D.C. contains about 7,000 works on Shakespeare, 20 years worth of reading if read at the rate of one a day. And as this volume slimly attests, the number keeps growing. Shakespeare Quarterly, the most exhaustive of bibliographers, logs about 4,000 serious new works, books, monographs, and other studies every year. To answer the most obvious question, this book was not written so much because the world needs another book on Shakespeare, as because this series does. The idea is a simple one: to see how much of Shakespeare we can actually know, really know from the record, which is one reason, of course, that it's so slender. So if you want to find out a little bit more about the life of Shakespeare, about what we know about the history of scholarship around Shakespeare, and you don't want to commit to a huge book, I recommend Bill Bryson, The World as a Stage. So this isn't the only book that we have about Shakespeare in the library, obviously. On our new nonfiction shelf, we have Shakespeare in a Divided America. James Shapiro is one of the preeminent American Shakespeare scholars, and he asks the question, why in a country Shakespeare never set foot in, an ocean away, do his works have so much resonance from the foundation of our American country and the founding fathers to today? So if you're interested in learning a little bit about Shakespeare's impact in America, I recommend this one off of our new nonfiction shelf. But of course, we also have video productions, both the classic starring Derek Jacobi and Patrick Stewart on this one, documentaries, more contemporary productions, Tom Hiddleston and Ben Whishaw here. We also have more biographies that go into a little more depth. We have his complete works, of course, but we also have modern translation versions of the works to help you parse through them. We have choose your own adventure versions, such as Romeo and or Juliet by Ryan Worth. There are modern text speak versions, Macbeth #killing it, graphic novels, and one of my very favorites, the Shakespeare book, which is full of pictures and images, charts, graphs, infographics, going through all of his plays and all of the stories behind them. So if you are interested in spending a little bit more time with the Bard this month, celebrating his birth, celebrating his works, learning a little bit more about the controversies behind those works, I recommend coming on in and checking out a book about Shakespeare. That is it for Grown Up Storytime this month. I will see you next month. Until then, keep reading. Thank you. Bye-bye.